What is a personal story you have that you don't tell because it sounds made up? Story 1. You just reminded me of the time my husband was a hostage at a bar. One of the regulars came in, drank a beer with everyone and then pulled out a gun. He said his wife was screwing his best friend and he'd had enough. He didn't want to live anymore and he hated his wife and wanted her to suffer too. So, he said anyone who wants to get out, go after we have a drink. He poured a few shots for all of them. Then knowing that the cops had been called, he fired a couple of shots into the ceiling. All the guys including my husband said man don't do this, but he hustled them out the back. Then he kicked the front door of the bar open and started firing into the ground while running for his car. He got shot 17 times and died instantly. But he was nice enough to tell all the guys goodbye and he'd put his wallet on the bar to pay for all of their drinks. I guess he wanted to apologize. I know because I called my husband and said hey what are you up to, and he said oh hey, I'm a hostage. Story 2. Not me, but my dad lived a wild and unbelievable life. He was a world-wandering vagabond who joined the Navy at 16 by giving his older brothers information. Back in the 1960s, my dad was in a plane crash, small plane, and it went down in the desert near Mexico. They didn't know what to do. So they split up, 2 went in one direction, 1 went another, and my dad went his own way. They thought one of them would run in to help that way. My dad ended up somewhere in Mexico and never went back. He just hung around, and traveled all over Central and South America. After almost a year, he decided it was time to go back home. But he ran out of cash or had no cash. So he sold his watch for a motorcycle. Used that to get to Mexico. Then, he sold/traded that motorcycle for a car. My dad was a mechanic. He could make any POS with an engine run for a bit, at least. Then drove north toward the US. He had no documentation. So he sold the car, walked through a ravine/ditch back into the US. When he actually made it to his brother's place through a combination of walking and hitchhiking, his brother and one of the guys from the plane crash were sitting on the porch drinking beers. They thought my dad had died. My dad thought the other guy died. They drank beers, played cards, and shot the shit. Years later, before I was born, my dad told my mom he was going to get the watch back. He drove from Chicago to Mexico. Took a bus to some place in Chiapas, IRC. Found the guy he sold the watch to, bought it back, and then drove all the way back to Chicago. I have the watch. We have pictures of my dad as a young man living it up in Mexico, India, Germany, UK, the Philippines, Hawaii, all over the US. Postcards he wrote to his brother and so on. Places that don't even exist anymore. My dad died when I was 16 years old. Story 3. I was 21, studying in London, and happened to notice Megadeth were playing that night, the days before easy internet access, so I grabbed the tube and headed to Camden to find tickets. On the way there, while riding the train, I noticed a girl wearing a Megadeth hoodie, so I approached her to ask if she knew whether tickets would be available at the venue, and she said the show was sold out. A guy overheard this conversation, confirmed there were no more tickets, and asked me if I really wanted to go, to which I enthusiastically replied yes. He said we're opening for them. Here, if you buy our CD for £10 I'll get you on the list. It was a Diamond Head tour member. He said he was their guitarist, but I'm not sure I believe that, and at this point I don't remember. Diamond Head wasn't a band I followed. Long story short, this is how I ended up seeing a kick-ass show with Diamond Head opening for Megadeth that night, and having a really long conversation with Dave Mustaine at the after party. Story 4. When I was 15, I entered a national portraiture competition and unexpectedly won it. I had a 30-minute conversation about art with the late Queen of England. She gave me a book about fine art and some shopping vouchers as a prize. Story 5. We were cruising around Huntington Beach in my friend's Mercury Comet back in the late 80s. Racing people randomly and generally being obnoxious. We are at red light and next to us is a little old lady in her nondescript Audi. My buddy guns the engine a few times as we hoot and holler at her. She turns her head slowly, and with a wry smile puts her handwheel. She is wearing those leather driving gloves, the ones with all the holes on the fingers. Light turns green and she absolutely smoked us. We were stunned and just watched her speed off. The story sounds like a scene from some 80s John Hughes movie. But it happened. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to notifications for new incredible stories.